Well, hello, it's Miss Gina. How are you? I missed our reading yesterday. We're on chapter 12. You're at story time, the shrinking house. So let's jump right in. I'm maybe talking quieter than I normally do, and we'll try to get louder. My grandbaby's sleeping in the next room. He may be snoring, who knows? Maybe we won't hear him. Willie Kurtz's back ached. Much as it made him wince to admit it, he was not as young as he used to be. Time was years ago. He could have hoisted his Lilliput in up easy as a whistle, lugged it to the truck, excuse me, and have it stowed quick as a wink. How he was stretched out in the bed with the heating pad switched up to hot under the small of his back and the television turned on for Channel 6 news, while the weatherman moved clouds and rainstorms around his map. Willie Kurtz debated whether he could safely ask his next-door neighbor, the souvenir shop man, to give him a hand with loading the reducer. But how would he explain moving the whole Lilliput, USA, away from Lake Meander before the peak of the tourist season? Moreover, the neighbors might already be putting two and two together. What with all the jabber about making dollhouses and that dad-blamed dog jogging closer every minute. On the television, the newscaster looked up from his script with a smile. Well, our canine friend Horace Hallam is still at it. After a steak furnished by a Summit County Sheriff's Department and an hour's siesta this afternoon, Horace was back on the trail of the suspected kidnapper. It now seems probable that the name used by the suspect was not his name. It was an alias. There is no trace of any such person owning or operating an electronics and television repair service in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, or Maryland. Police admit that at the moment, Horace is their only lead. So his owner, Mr. John Hallam, says we can only hope that Horace and the trail hold out. The last report from the patrol car following the large Great Dane is that he is now on Route 711 and could be heading for either Pontotoc or Lake Meander. The professor gave a dreadful groan, switched off the heating pad, and lurched up to switch off the distressing news. All my life's work and uncle's, he moaned. Risked for a stupid house. Ah, if only I had left well enough alone in Brittlesdale. They would have gone on supposing it no more than a dollhouse. No reason to think otherwise, was there? A nervous old fool. That's what I am. He reached for the coffee pot. Pontotoc. Wished I had gone through Pontotoc. The smell from the paper milled have covered the trail like a blanket. But flight was now the only answer. Far away, he would go to New Jersey. No, not far enough. Florida? All the work of setting the museum up in a new location. The very thought made him weary. And he had been so close to perfecting the reducer. $50, only $50 more, and he could have set a magnetic. The thought trailed off as he found himself staring fixedly at something. That should not have been where it was. A string hung from the corner of the great U-shaped table in the museum room. Odd that he should not have noticed it when he had carried the town hall out to the truck. He poured a cup of reheated coffee and went out to take a look. It was not a string. It was a tiny rope. Got some new glasses. Ooh, those are cool. So he's found the rope. It was not a string, it was a tiny rope, tied to a dowel rod trunk of a dusty imitation tree and knotted at intervals. The bottom end brushed the floor. By the great Harry, the professor gaped. I think he's referring to Harry Houdini. They was here and gone. And where in blazes could they go? Blast that Mary Bright. She's the bad luck of the Kurtzes, she is. And the brat she's got with her. The back door, he noticed, was ajar. They could be well away. Excuse me. By now, he tried to think what difference this new development made, but his mind moved as stickily and slowly as molasses. No Florida now. That was clear. If Mary Bright and Mindy found help, Pago would not be far enough away from Lilliput, USA. He knelt, fingering the rope, filled with confusion, unseeing eyes fixed on the dusty floor. It was minutes before, rousing himself, the professor saw the scrap of paper a scant 3 feet away. Creaking forward onto his knees under the table, Kurtz picked it up and turned it over. Idly, blankly, then suddenly, eyes and mind sharpened. And he teetered sideways unsteadily. Fumbling all thumbs, he smoothed it flat against the knee, a flimsy scrap of cream-colored notepaper. It was only 3 inches wide and was torn across the bottom. Jotted on it, apparently in haste and with leaky pen, was a cryptic memo. Doppel? Dissap 1915. I think that means disappeared. CHK, newspaper. RE, lost. Think newspaper. Check for things that are lost. Fortune and securities in DBNK. Ask you, letter U. WRNT. They, INDEL. TYPEWR, question mark. Now, MBM. That's something about a business machine. An indelible bank? Maybe. Kurtz forgot that he was under the table. Rising up in his excitement, he fetched himself a smart crack on the head, which was already reeling. A fortune? The lovely word rang like a peal of bells. Did somebody say bell? DBNK? D bank? Doppelbank? His bank. It had to mean that. He felt a sudden dampening chill. Someone knew then about Doppel. Who could have dropped the note? Had the room been swept since closing time on Saturday? He thought, not Saturday? That had to be it. But there had been dozens of visitors on Saturday, and none had seemed overly curious. Unless, no, it could not be a ruse. That was sure, for meddling Mary Bucklebright could have no knowledge of what was locked up in the bank. No, it had been someone with some connection with Doppel. Ask you, the letter U, asked Umstadt? No, the Miss Britomart uncle had been an only child, and if she had married, her children would not be Umstadt's. Could it be a nephew, a cousin? The professor's hand shook, and panic rose. If discovery was closing in from both sides, there was no time to lose. All of the houses, all except the bank, were already in the truck. The bank and the reducer must be loaded and moved at once. Only then did the light dawn. A fortune in the bank? A fortune in negotiable securities? Who needed Lilliput, USA? Backache forgotten. The professor rushed into preparations for possessing himself of the fortune, so happily close at hand. Having rooted an old wheelbarrow out of the shed, he tooled it through the back door and around into the well of the U-shaped table where the bank sat. Looking deceptively blank and rather shabby, hoisting it up, Kurtz transferred it to the hand barrow with a jarring thunk and wheeled it out of the door at a trot down the weedy gravelled path to the field beyond the bottom of the tangled garden. In the middle of the largest space, well screened from the neighbors by trees, he unloaded it hurriedly onto the grass and trotted back up the path to fetch the reducer. A large and ungainly machine, it had been filled with grip handles and caster wheels for ease of movement. In a moment, it was rattling down the uneven path. The professor fairly flying behind, only luck in the shape of a chance encounter of a small front wheel with a large pine cone kept machine and professor from plunging past the bank and into the small stream that trickled across the field's far edge. The professor, straining hard with grunts and wheezes, lined the reducer up with the bank, where it sat cupola high in the weeds. He aimed it carefully. The focusing apparatus was screwed in and out until he was satisfied with its adjustment. To the watchers in the bank, it looked more than anything else like a large and comical pig snout, wound around with wire like an electrical coil. Think the old geezer knows what he's doing? Herman Goff breathed in Augustus Doppel's ear. I most sincerely hope not. Mr. Doppel put a hand on his stomach, as if so calm, the flutter that was growing more violent with every suspenseful minute. Carefully, on tiptoe, the two old men moved away from the front window where they had watched through the clear glass lettered that spelled "Our First Bank" on the frosted glass window. The words of Doppel had long ago been passed over with an old Christmas sticker on which the professor had neatly written, "Join our Christmas club." The others were already out of sight, and at Mr. Goff's signal, deep breaths were taken all around. This was, as Miss Britomart had put it, the big crunch. The professor had followed their lure and was about to bite. The bank's front door was helpfully unlocked, and the outer vault room door was accommodatingly ajar. The combination of the vault was conveniently noted on a slip of paper clipped to a bulletin board hanging beside the vault door. The waiting and the silence became increasingly uncomfortable. Sibylla struggled with a hay-feverish urge to sneeze. Mindy uncrossed and recrossed her fingers. Shifting her weight from one heel to the other as she crouched out of sight behind a filling it's not a filling, it's a filing, excuse me. My eyes are tired this morning. Behind a filing cabinet in the outer vault room. Excuse me. Here is another drawing for you of Doppel. That's behind the glass. That's a picture. After several uncomfortable moments, Mrs. Bright slipped from her hiding place and crept up the rickety stairs to join Samantha in the cupola. Torn between her determination to have things restored to their proper proportions and her reluctance to watch poor old Willie Kurtz's nephew make his last blunder, she had decided that she did not care to be near the vault room when the trap was sprung. Still nothing happened. The reducer hummed and thrummed. A cool evening breeze ruffled the crabgrass and ragweed, but nothing happened. Oh! The professor danced excitedly around the machine, flipping switches, making adjustments according to the readings of the confusing profusion of dials. This involved further delay, as he had to fetch papers and pencils in order to make the necessary calculations. At last, he drew a deep breath and moved the main switch from inactive to magnify. Nervously, he peered out from behind the reducer. The bank had not grown an inch. The professor's dark head bobbled up and down behind the machine in the frenzy of adjustment and impatience. Mrs. Bright and Samantha, watching from the cupola window, saw his growing agitation with mixed approval and distress. With a fortune near enough to touch, but yet out of reach, he was suffering from a rising fever of greed. Elbows flapping, coattails like moans of anticipation and frustration, everything about him quivered with avarice. Further adjustment, surely, but nothing happened at all. Nothing. Nope. Not a thing. So, you remember last chapter, or chapter before last, it was either chapter 11 or 12, they baked some cookies. Well, next time we'll be on chapter 13. Chapter 13, and there's some cookies to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Did you know that 13 is what they consider a baker's dozen? Because the baker bakes cookies, and then the baker has to taste that cookie. So they eat one. They eat one cookie. So a baker's dozen is 13, but a real dozen is only 12. This is a dozen, but this is a baker's dozen. And this is our next chapter. We'll be on chapter 13 next time. So I hope you enjoyed that story. And so I'll see you next time. Remember to grow your brain. See you next time. Bye-bye.